4. The highest Petersburg society is really all one. All who belong to it know and even visit one another. But this large circle has its subdivisions. Anna Arkadyevna Karenina had friends and close connections in 3 different sets. One of these was her husband's official set, consisting of his colleagues and subordinates, who in most varied and capricious ways were connected and separated by social conditions. Anna found it hard now to recall the feeling of almost religious respect she had at first felt for these people. Now she knew them all as well as the inhabitants of a provincial town know one another. She knew the habits and weaknesses of each of them, and where the shoe pinched this or that foot. She knew their relations to one another and to the governing centre. She knew who sided with whom, and how and by what means each supported himself, and who agreed or disagreed with whom, and about what. But, in spite of admonitions and advice from the Countess Lydia Ivanovna, this bureaucratic circle of male interests could not interest Anna, and she avoided it. Another circle with which Anna was intimate was that through which Karenina had made his career. The centre of that circle was the Countess Lydia Ivanovna. It consisted of elderly, plain, philanthropic and pious women, and clever, well-educated, ambitious men. One of the clever men who belonged to it called it the conscience of Petersburg society. Karenina set great value on this circle, and Anna, who knew how to get on with everyone, had during the first part of her life in Petersburg made friends in it too. But now, on her return from Moscow, that circle became unbearable to her. It seemed to her that she, and all of them, were only pretending, and she felt so bored and uncomfortable in that society that she visited Lydia Ivanovna as rarely as possible. The third circle with which Anna was connected was society in the accepted meaning of the word. The society of balls, dinner parties, brilliant toilettes, the society which clung to the court with one hand lest it should sink to the demi-monde. For this the members of that society thought they despised, though its tastes were not only similar, but identical with their own. Anna was connected with this set through the Princess Betsy Tverskaya, the wife of her cousin, who had an income of 120,000 rubles a year, and who, from the time Anna first appeared in society, had particularly liked her, made much of her, and drawn her into her own set, making fun of that to which the Countess Lydia Ivanovna belonged. "When I'm old and ugly, I will become like that," Betsy used to say. "But for you, a young and beautiful woman, it is too early to settle down in that almshouse." At first, Anna had avoided the Princess Tverskaya's set as much as she could, because it demanded more expense than she could afford, and also because she really approved more of the other set. But after her visit to Moscow, all this was reversed. She avoided her moral friends and went into grand society. There she saw Vronsky, and experienced a tremulous joy when meeting him. She met him most frequently at Betsy's, who was Vronsky herself and his cousin. Vronsky went everywhere where he had a chance of meeting Anna, and spoke to her of his love whenever he could. She gave him no encouragement, but every time they met, there sprang up that feeling of animation which had seized her in the train on the morning when she first saw him. She was aware that when they met, joy lit up her eyes and drew her lips into a smile, but she could not hide the expression of that joy. At first, Anna sincerely believed that she was displeased with him for allowing himself to persecute her. But soon after her return from Moscow, having gone to a party where she expected to meet him, but to which he did not come, she clearly realized, by the sadness that overcame her, that she had been deceiving herself, and that his persecution supplied the whole interest of her life. A famous prima donna was giving her second performance, and all high society was at the opera house. Vronsky, from the front row of the stalls, seeing his cousin, went to her box without waiting for the interval. "Why did you not come to dinner?" she said, adding with a smile, and so that only he could hear her, "I'm amazed at the clairvoyance of lovers. She was not there. But come in after the opera." Vronsky looked at her inquiringly. She nodded, and he thanked her by a smile and sat down beside her. "And how well I remember your ridicule," continued the Princess Betsy, who took particular pleasure in following the progress of this passion. "What has become of it all? You are caught, my dear fella." "I wish for nothing better than to be caught, replied Vronsky with his calm, good-natured smile. To tell the truth, if I complain at all, it is only of not being caught enough. I'm beginning to lose hope. What hope can you have? Said Betsy, offended on her friend's behalf. Entendons-nous. But in her eyes little sparkles twinkled which said that she understood very well, and just as he did, what hope he might have. None whatever, said Vronsky, laughing and showing his close-set teeth. Excuse me, he added, taking from her hand the opera glasses, and he set to work to scan across her bare shoulders the row of boxes opposite. I'm afraid I'm becoming ridiculous. He knew very well that he ran no risk of appearing ridiculous, either in Betsy's eyes or in the eyes of society people generally. He knew very well that in their eyes, the role of the disappointed lover of a maiden, or of any single woman, might be ridiculous, but the role of a man who was pursuing a married woman, and who made it the purpose of his life at all cost to draw her into adultery, was one which had in it something beautiful and dignified, and could never be ridiculous. So it was with a proud, glad smile, lurking under his moustache, that he put down the opera glasses and looked at his cousin. And why did you not come to dinner? She said admiringly. I must tell you about that. I was engaged, and with what do you think? I'll give you 100 or 1,000 guesses, and you won't find out. I was making peace between a husband and a fellow who had insulted his wife. Yes, really. Well, and did you succeed? Nearly. You must tell me all about it, she said, rising. Come back in the next interval. I can't. I'm going to the French theatre. What, from Nielsen? Asked Betsy, quite horrified, though she could not have distinguished Nielsen's voice from that of a chorus girl. It can't be helped. I have an appointment there in connection with this same peacemaking of mine. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be saved, said Betsy, remembering that she had heard someone say something like that. Well then, sit down and tell me about it. And she sat down again. 5. It's rather improper, but so charming that I long to tell it, said Vronsky, gazing at her with laughing eyes. I shan't mention names. So much the better. I shall guess them. Well then, listen. 2 gay young fellows were out driving. Officers of your regiment, of course. I didn't say officers, but just 2 young men who had been lunching. Translate that, not wisely, but too well. It may be. They were on their way to dine with a comrade, and in the highest spirits. They see that a pretty woman in a hired sledge is passing them, looking at them, and laughing and nodding to them. At any rate, they think so. Of course, off they go after her, galloping full speed. To their surprise, the lovely one stops at the door of the very house they are going to. She runs up to the top flat. They only manage to see a pair of red lips beneath a short veil and lovely little feet. You tell it with so much feeling that I think you yourself must have been one of the 2. And what did you say to me just now? Well, the young men go into their comrade's flat. He was giving a farewell dinner. There they may really have drunk rather too much, as always happens at farewell dinners. At dinner they inquire who lives in the top flat. No one knows, but their host's footman, in answer to their question whether girls live there, replies that there are a lot of them thereabouts. After dinner, the young men go into the host's study to compose a letter to the fair stranger, and, having written one full of passion and containing a declaration, they carry it upstairs themselves, in order to explain anything that might not be quite clear in the letter. Why do you tell me such horrors? Well? They ring. A maid opens the door. They give her the letter and assure her that they are both so much in love that they will die at once on the doorstep. The maid, quite bewildered, carries on the negotiations. Suddenly a gentleman with sausage-shaped whiskers and as red as a lobster appears, announces that no one but his wife lives in that flat, and turns them both out. How do you know he had sausage-shaped whiskers, as you say? You just listen. Today I went to reconcile them. Well, what happened? This is the most interesting part. It turns out that the happy couple are a titular councillor and a titular councilloress. The titular councillor lodges a complaint, and I turn into a peacemaker. And what a peacemaker. I assure you, Talleyrand was nothing to me. What was the difficulty? You shall hear. We duly apologized. We are in despair. We beg to be forgiven for our unfortunate mistake. The titular councillor with his sausages begins to thaw, but also wishes to express his feelings, and as soon as he begins to express them, he begins to get excited and grows insulting. And again I have to set all my diplomatic talents in motion. I agree that they acted badly, but beg you to consider that it was a mistake. Consider their youth, besides which the young man had just died. You understand. They repent from the bottom of their hearts and ask you to forgive their fault. The titular councillor again softens. I am willing to forgive them, Count, but you must understand that my wife, a respectable woman, has been subjected to the rudeness and insults of these hobbledehoys, these scound. And you must remember that one of the hobbledehoys is standing there, and I have to reconcile them. Again I saw my diplomacy going, and again, just as the whole business should be concluded, my titular councillor flies into a rage, gets red, his sausages stick out, and again I dissolve into diplomatic subtlety. "Oh, you must hear this," cried Betsy, laughing and turning to a lady who was just entering the box. "He's made me laugh so." "Well, bonne chance," she added, giving Vronsky a finger that was not engaged in holding her fan, and with a movement of her shoulders making the bodice of her dress, that had risen a little, slip down again, that she might be befittingly nude on returning to the front of the box into the glare of gaslight and the gaze of all eyes. Vronsky went to the French theatre, where he really had to see the commander of his regiment, who never omitted a single performance there, to talk over this reconciliation business, which had occupied and amused him for the last 3 days. Petritsky, whom Vronsky was fond of, was mixed up in the affair, and so was young Prince Kadrov, a first-rate fellow and a capital comrade, who had lately joined the regiment. Above all, the interests of the regiment were involved. Both officers belonged to Vronsky's squadron. Titular Councillor Wendin had been to see the commander and had lodged a complaint against the officers who had insulted his wife. His young wife, so Wendin declared, he had been married 6 months, had been to church with her mother, and suddenly feeling unwell as a result of her interesting condition, was unable to stand any longer, and took the first good sledge she could find. These officers, in their sledge, raced after her. She became frightened, and feeling still more unwell, ran up the stairs to her flat. Wendin himself, having returned from his office, and hearing the front door bell and voices, went out, saw the tipsy officers with the ladder, and hustled them out. He requested that they should be severely punished. "No, say what you like," the commander remarked to Vronsky, whom he had invited to his house. "Petritsky is becoming impossible. Not a week passes without some scandal. That councillor will not let the matter rest. He will go further with it." Vronsky realized how ungrateful a task it was, that a duel was out of the question, and that everything must be done to soften the titular councillor and hush up the affair. The CEO had called Vronsky in just because he knew him to be honourable and able, and above all a man who valued the honour of the regiment. After discussing the matter, they decided that Vronsky should go with Petritsky and Kadrov to apologize to the councillor. Both the commander and Vronsky were aware that Vronsky's name and his badge as aide-de-camp to the Emperor ought greatly to help in softening the titular councillor's feelings, and really, these things had a partial effect. But the result of the peacemaking still remained doubtful, as Vronsky had explained. Having reached the French theatre, Vronsky went out into the foyer with the CEO and informed him of his success or lack of success. After considering the whole question, the commander decided to let the matter drop. But, for amusement, he asked Vronsky for particulars of the interview, and could not help laughing for a long time as he listened to the description of how the titular councillor suddenly again flared up at the recollection of some incident of the affair, and how Vronsky manoeuvred so as to retire just at the last half-word of reconciliation, pushing Petritsky before him. "A bad business, but most amusing. Kadrov cannot fight that good man. And so he was in a great rage?" repeated the commander, laughing. "But what do you think of Claire this evening? Wonderful," he went on, referring to the new French actress. "However often one sees her, she's new each day. Only the French can do that." 6. Princess Betsy went home without waiting for the end of the last act. She had scarcely time to go to her dressing room, put powder on her long pale face and rub it off again, smarten herself up and order tea to be served in the big drawing room, before one carriage after another began to arrive at the door of her immense house on the Great Morskaya. The visitors passed beneath the broad portico, and a massive hall porter, who in the mornings read a newspaper behind the glass panes of the front door for the edification of passers-by, now noiselessly opened this enormous door to admit them. Almost at one and the same time, the hostess, her hair rearranged and her face freshened up, entered at one door, and the visitors at another, of the large dark-walled drawing room, with its thick carpets and brightly lit table, shining in the candlelight with white tablecloth, silver samovar, and translucent china. The hostess sat down beside the samovar and took off her gloves, the chairs being moved by the aid of unobtrusive footmen. The company settled down, separating into two circles, one with the hostess round the samovar, the other, at the opposite end of the room, round the wife of an ambassador, a beautiful woman with black sharply outlined eyebrows in a black velvet dress. The conversation in both circles, as always happens at first, hesitated for a few minutes, was interrupted by greetings, recognitions, and offers of tea, and seemed to be seeking something to settle on. "She's wonderfully good as an actress. One sees that she has studied Kaulbach," remarked an attaché in the circle around the ambassador's wife. "Did you notice how she felt?" "Oh, please don't let us talk about Nielsen. It's impossible to say anything new about her," said a stout, red-faced, fair-haired lady who wore an old silk dress and had no eyebrows and no chignon. This was the Princess Myakaya, notorious for her simplicity and the roughness of her manners, and nicknamed l'enfant terrible. The Princess Myakaya was seated midway between the two circles, listening and taking part in the conversation of both. "This very same sentence about Kaulbach has been repeated to me by 3 different people today, as if by arrangement. That sentence, I don't know why, seemed to please them very much." The conversation was broken by this remark, and it became necessary to find another topic. "Tell us something amusing but not malicious," said the ambassador's wife, a great adept at that kind of elegant conversation which the English call small talk, turning to the attaché, who was also at a loss what subject to start. "People say that is very difficult, and that only what is malicious is amusing," he began with a smile. "But I will try, if you will give me a theme. The theme is everything. Once one has a theme, it is easy to embroider on it. I often think that the famous talkers of the last century would find it difficult to talk cleverly nowadays. We're all so tired of the clever things." "That was said long ago," interrupted the ambassador's wife, laughingly. The conversation had begun very prettily, but just because it was too pretty, it languished again. They had to return to the one sure and never-failing resource: slander. "Don't you think there is something Louis XV about Tushkevich?" said the attaché, glancing at a handsome, fair-haired young man who stood by the table. "Ah, yes, he matches the drawing-room. That is why he comes here so often." This conversation did not flag, since it hinted at what could not be spoken of in this room, namely, at the relations existing between Tushkevich and their hostess. Around the hostess and the samovar, the conversation, after flickering for some time in the same way between the 3 inevitable themes, the latest public news, the theatre, and criticism of one's neighbour, also caught on when it got to the last of these themes: slander. "Have you heard that Maltischeva woman also, not the daughter but the mother, is having a Diable Rose costume made for herself?" "You don't mean to say so? How delicious! I wonder that she, with her common sense, for she is not stupid, does not see how ridiculous she makes herself." Everyone had something disparaging to say about the unfortunate Maltischeva, and the conversation began cracking merrily like a kindling bonfire. The Princess Betsy's husband, a fat, good-natured man, an enthusiastic collector of engravings, hearing that his wife had visitors, entered the drawing-room before going to his club. Stepping silently on the thick carpet, he approached the Princess Myakaya. "How did you like Nielsen?" he inquired. "Oh, How can you steal on one like that? How you frightened me, said she in reply. Please don't talk to me about the opera. You know nothing of music. I'd better descend to your level and talk about your majolica and engravings. Come now, tell me about the treasures you've picked up lately at the rag fair. Shall I show you? But you don't understand them. Yes, let me see them. I haven't learned from those, what is their name? The bankers. They have some splendid engravings. They showed them to us. What? Have you been to the Schussburgs? Asked the hostess from her place by the samovar. I have, my chef. They asked my husband and me to dinner, and I was told that the sauce alone at that dinner cost 1,000 rubles, said the Princess Miakhaya loudly, feeling that everybody was listening. And a very nasty sauce it was too, something green. We had to invite them, and I gave them a sauce that cost 85 kopecks, and satisfied everyone. I can't afford 1,000 ruble sauces. She's unique, said the hostess. Wonderful, said someone else. The effect produced by the Princess Miakhaya's words was always the same, and the secret of that effect lay in the fact that although she often, as at that moment, spoke not quite to the point, her words were simple and had a meaning. In the society in which she lived, words of that kind produced the effect of a most witty joke. The Princess Miakhaya did not understand why her words had such an effect, but was aware that they did and availed herself of it. As while she was speaking, everybody listened to her, and the conversation in the circle round the ambassador's wife stopped. The hostess wished to make one circle of the whole company, and turning to the ambassador's wife, said, Will you really not have a cup of tea? You should come and join us here. No, we're very comfortable here, replied the ambassador's wife, smiling, and she continued the interrupted conversation. It was a very pleasant conversation. They were disparaging the Karenins, husband and wife. Anna has changed very much since her trip to Moscow. There's something strange about her, said a friend of Anna's. The chief change is that she has brought back with her the shadow of Alexis Vronsky, said the ambassador's wife. Well, why not? Grimm has a fable called The Man Without a Shadow, about a man who lost his shadow as a punishment for something or other. I never could understand why it was a punishment. But for a woman to be without a shadow can't be pleasant. Yes, but a woman with a shadow generally ends badly, said Anna's friend. A murrain on your tongue, suddenly remarked the Princess Miakhaya, hearing those words. Anna Karenina is a splendid woman. I don't like her husband, but I'm very fond of her. Why don't you like her husband? He's such a remarkable man, said the ambassador's wife. My husband says there are few statesmen like him in Europe. My husband tells me the same, but I don't believe it, replied the Princess Miakhaya. If our husbands did a talk, you should see things as they really are. And it's my opinion that Karenina is simply stupid. I say it in a whisper. Does this not make everything quite clear? Formerly, when I was told to consider him wise, I kept trying to. I thought I was stupid myself because I was unable to perceive his wisdom. But as soon as I said to myself, he's stupid, only in a whisper, of course, it all became quite clear. Don't you think so? How malicious you are today. Not at all. I have no choice. One of us is stupid, and you know it's impossible to say so of oneself. No one is satisfied with his position, but everyone is satisfied with his wit, remarked the attaché, quoting some French lines. That's just it, rejoined the Princess Miakhaya, turning quickly toward him. But the point is that I won't abandon Anna to you. She's so excellent, so charming. What is she to do if everyone is in love with her and follows her about like a shadow? But I don't even think of blaming her, Anna's friend said, justifying herself. If no one follows us about like a shadow, that does not prove that we have a right to judge her. Having snubbed Anna's friend handsomely, the Princess Miakhaya rose with the ambassador's wife and joined those at the table where there was a general conversation about the King of Prussia. Whom were you backbiting there? Asked Batsy. The Karenins. The princess was characterizing Karenin, replied the ambassador's wife with a smile, seating herself at the table. It's a pity we did not hear it, said the hostess, glancing at the door. Ah, here you are at last, she added, smilingly addressing Vronsky as he entered the room. Vronsky not only knew everybody in the room, but saw them all every day, so he answered in the calm manner of one who rejoins those from whom he has parted only a short time before. "Where do I come from?" he said in reply to the ambassador's wife. "There's no help for it. I must confess that I come from the Théâtre Bouffe. I've been there 100 times, and always with fresh pleasure. Excellent. I know it's a disgrace, but at the opera I go to sleep, while at the Bouffe I stay till the last minute enjoying it. Tonight," and he named a French actress and was about to tell them something about her, when the ambassador's wife stopped him with mock alarm. "Please don't talk about those horrors." "All right, I won't, especially as everybody knows those horrors. And everybody would go there if it were considered a thing, as the opera is," put in the Princess Myakaya. "7. Steps were heard at the entrance, and the Princess Betsy, knowing that it was Anna, glanced at Vronsky. He was looking at the door with a strange new expression on his face. He gazed joyfully, intently, and yet timidly at the lady who was entering, and slowly rose from his seat. Anna entered the room holding herself, as usual, very erect, and without changing the direction of her eyes, approached her hostess, walking with that quick, firm, yet light step which distinguished her from other society women. She shook hands, smilingly, and with the same smile looked round at Vronsky. He bowed low and moved the chair toward her. Anna responded only by an inclination of the head, though she blushed and frowned. But immediately, nodding rapidly to her acquaintances, and pressing the hands extended to her, she turned again to her hostess. "I've just been at the Countess Lydia's. I meant to come sooner, but could not get away. Sir John was there. He's very interesting." "Ah, that missionary?" "Yes. He was telling us about Indian life. He was very interesting." The conversation, interrupted by her entrance, again burnt up like the flame of a lamp that has been blown out. "Sir John, yes, Sir John. I've seen him. He speaks very well. The elder Vlasheva is quite in love with him." "And is it true that the younger Vlasheva is going to be married to Topov?" "Yes, they say it's quite settled." "I'm surprised at her parents. They say it's a love match." "Love match? What antediluvian ideas you have! Who talks of love nowadays?" said the ambassador's wife. "What's to be done? That silly old fashion hasn't died out yet," said Vronsky. "So much the worse for those who follow the fashion. I know of happy marriages, but only such as are founded on reason." "Yes, but how often the happiness of marriage is founded on reason crumbles to dust because the very passion that was disregarded makes itself felt later," said Vronsky. "But by marriages founded on reason, we mean marriages between those who have both passed through that madness. It's like scarlet fever. One has to get it over." "Then someone should invent a way of inoculating love, like vaccination." "When I was young, I was in love with a chorister," said Princess Myakaya. "I don't know whether it did me any good." "No, joking apart, I believe that to understand love, one must first make a mistake and then correct it," said the Princess Betsy. "Even after marriage?" said the ambassador's wife archly. "It is never too late to mend," said the attaché, quoting the English proverb. "Exactly," chimed in Betsy. "One has to make mistakes and correct them. What do you think?" she asked, addressing Anna, who with her scarcely discernible resolute smile was listening to this conversation. "I think," replied Anna, toying with the glove she had pulled off, "I think, if it is true that there are as many minds as there are heads, then there are as many kinds of love as there are hearts." Vronsky had gazed at Anna, and with sinking heart waited to hear what she would say. He sighed, as after a danger averted, when she had uttered these words. Suddenly Anna addressed him. "I have received a letter from Moscow. They write that Kitty Shcherbazskaya is very ill." "Really?" said Vronsky, frowning. Anna glanced sternly at him. "It does not interest you?" "On the contrary, it interests me very much. What exactly do they write, if I may ask?" he inquired. Anna rose and went up to Betsy. "Give me a cup of tea," she said, stopping behind Betsy's chair. While Betsy was pouring out the tea, Vronsky went up to Anna. What do they write? He asked again. I often think men don't understand honour, though they're always talking about it, said Anna, without answering his question. I've long wanted to tell you, she added, and moving a few steps to a side table on which lay some albums, she sat down. I don't quite understand your meaning, he said, handing her the cup. I wanted to tell you, she began again, without looking at him, that you've behaved badly, very badly. Don't I know that I behaved badly? But who is the cause? Why say that to me? She asked, looking severely at him. You know why, he answered boldly and joyously, meeting her look and continuing to gaze at her. It was not he, but she who became abashed. That only proves you have no heart, she said, but her look said that she knew he had a heart, and that she therefore feared him. What you've just referred to was a mistake, and not love. Anna shuddered and said, Don't you remember that I forbade you to mention that word, that horrid word? But then she felt that the one word forbade showed that she claimed certain rights over him, thereby encouraging him to speak of love. I've long wanted to say that to you, she went on, looking resolutely into his eyes, her face all aglow and suffused with a burning blush. And today I came on purpose, knowing I should meet you here. I've come to tell you that this must stop. I've never till now had to blush before anyone, but you make me feel as if I were guilty of something. He looked at her and was struck by the new spiritual beauty of her face. What do you want of me? He asked, simply and seriously. I want you to go to Moscow and beg Kitty's pardon, said she. You don't want that, he replied. He saw that she was saying what she forced herself to utter, and not what she wished to say. If you love me as you say you do, she whispered, behave so that I may be at peace. His face brightened. Don't you know that you're all my life to me? But peace I do not know, and can't give to you. My whole being, my love, yes. I cannot think about you and about myself separately. You and I are one to me, and I do not see before us the possibility of peace either for me or for you. I see the possibility of despair, misfortune, or of happiness. What happiness? Is it impossible? He added with his lips only, but she heard. She exerted all the powers of her mind to say what she ought, but instead she fixed on him her eyes filled with love, and did not answer at all. This is it, he thought with rapture. Just as I was beginning to despair, and when it seemed as though the end would never come, here it is. She loves me. She acknowledges it. Do this for me. Never say such words to me, and let us be good friends. These were her words, but her eyes said something very different. Friends we shall not be, you know that yourself. But whether we shall be the happiest or the most miserable of human beings rests with you. She wished to say something, but he interrupted her. I ask only one thing. I ask the right to hope and suffer as I do now. But if even that is impossible, command me to disappear, and I will do it. You shall not see me if my presence is painful to you. I don't want to drive you away. Only don't change anything. Leave everything as it is, he said with trembling voice. Here's your husband. Indeed, just at that moment Karenina, with his deliberate, ungraceful gait, entered the drawing-room. He glanced at his wife and Vronsky, went up to the hostess, and having sat down with a cup of tea, began talking in his deliberate and always clear tones, in his usual ironical way ridiculing somebody. Your Hotel Rambouillet is in full muster, said he, glancing round the whole company. The Graces and the Muses. But the Princess Betsy could not bear that tone of his. Sneering, she called it in English. So, like a clever hostess, she at once led him into a serious conversation on universal military service. Karenina was immediately absorbed in the conversation, and began defending the new law very earnestly against the Princess Betsy, who attacked it. Vronsky and Anna remained sitting at the little table. This is becoming indecent, whispered a lady, indicating by a glance Vronsky, Anna, and Anna's husband. "What did I tell you?" replied Anna's friend. Not these two ladies alone, but nearly all those present in the drawing-room, even the Princess Miakhkaya and Betty herself, several times glanced across at the pair who had gone away from the general circle, as if their having done so disturbed the others. Only Karenina did not once glance that way, and was not distracted from the interesting conversation in which he was engaged. Noticing the unpleasant impression produced on everyone, the Princess Betsy manoeuvred for someone else to take her place and to listen to Karenina, and she herself went up to Anna. "I'm always amazed at your husband's clearness and exactitude of expression," she said. "The most transcendental ideas become accessible to me when he speaks." "Ah, yes," said Anna, radiant with a smile of happiness and not understanding a single word of what Betsy was saying. And going across to the big table, she joined in the general conversation. After half an hour's stay, Karenina went up to his wife and suggested that they should go home together. But, without looking at him, she answered that she would stay to supper. Karenina bowed to the company and went away. The Karenina's fat old Tartar coachman, in his shiny leather coat, was finding it hard to control the near grey horse that had grown restive with cold, waiting before the portico. The footman stood holding open the carriage door. The hall porter stood with his hand on the outer front door. Anna, with a deft little hand, was disengaging the lace of her sleeve, which had caught on a hook of her fur coat, and with bent head was listening with delight to what Vronsky, who accompanied her, was saying. "Granted that you have not said anything. I don't demand anything," he was saying, "but you know that it is not friendship I want. Only one happiness is possible for me in life, the word you so dislike. Yes, love." "Love," she slowly repeated to herself, and suddenly, while releasing the lace, she added aloud, "The reason I dislike that word is that it means too much for me, far more than you can understand." And she looked him in the face. "Au revoir." She gave him her hand, and with her quick elastic step, went past the hall porter and vanished into the carriage. Her glance and the touch of her hand burned him. He kissed the palm of his hand where she had touched it, and went home happy in the knowledge that in this one evening he had made more progress toward his aim than he had during the previous 2 months.